Good evening, everyone. I am back with another tutorial. This one is about competitive Americans, and um, as usual, I'm doing my usual style. I've made a PowerPoint, and my intention is to go over at least the major powers of bolt action, and a couple of minor ones as well will sneak in there. I'm at least considering doing the Polish and the Finnish, so some of them. Romanians and Bulgarians may also be on the list. Um, but I won't be talking about every nation because not every nation is competitive, right? So, but I've made a PowerPoint for us that we can go and watch, and let's do that. So, here we go. Competitive USA. Now, disclaimers as per usual. This is only for competitive purposes. If you're wanting to do thematic Americans, this is not the video for you. I am just looking at it in a cost-benefit analysis of what Americans do well in bolt action as a game, not as anything else. I uh, I have played some Americans mostly as like a counter to other things. So a training. I haven't brought Americans to any major tournaments. I've played against Americans quite extensively, and I have trained American players as well. So I do know my way around them. The competitive advantages that I see with Americans is that they have a very good tank selection. Um, Basically, it's a little shy of what the Soviets have because the Soviets have their own tanks and the Lend-Lease American tanks, but it is a pretty good tank selection. There is a broad like spectrum of different tanks that you can take, although the early war tanks are somewhat lacking. They also have some of the best equipment of the game, and I'll get back to that. There are at least two pieces of equipment that I find really, really useful in my American lists and my American opponents. And they are the best skirmish nation. So if your playstyle is you like to deliver pins and you like to do the shooting aspect of the game, which I know is where at least a couple of years ago everyone was talking about pins wins, right, so that the pins would win games. And if you're into that, Americans is for you. Americans for me is a good beginner army because it's fairly easy to become competent with Americans. And this the skirmish national special rules, the move and fire national special rule really benefits beginners. However, it can be a bit tricky to win tournaments with. Um, so I'm not saying that you'll immediately become the best player in the world just because you're playing Americans. No, you should go and play Soviets if you want to do that. Um, no, I mean Americans. We have seen Americans do well, and the current world champion Dan Lane, he did win the WTC solo win. It is a team tournament, but he was the best placed single player at the WTCC, so he's the current ruling world champion, I guess, and he did so with Americans. So you can really get far if you know your way around them, but they are more difficult to play at a hyper competitive level. We saw this as well at the recent English Nationals, where in the top 10, I think you had two American lists, the rest were Soviets and British. So they can do competitive, but maybe are more difficult than some of the others. They have very, very good regular infantry, and maybe this is one of the places where they sort of are not the utmost of competitiveness, because regular infantry in bolt action is meh. It's okay, um, and it's especially good for some purposes, which the Americans take advantage of. And they have a very good transport selection as well. Um, for me, especially the Dodgers are a good choice because they can have pintle-mounted machine guns and they can transport 8 men, which is a very good size for many things. So, right, those were the competitive advantages. Disadvantages. Um, the American selections of armored cars is curiously lacking because if you look at the British selection, they had loads of Lend-Lease American vehicles, and they are very, very good. But the Americans weren't using them themselves. Most of the American choices that you get in the armored car slot is they're open topped, and that open top is a disadvantage. So the American armored cars are not really that good. Um, is what it is. They're also lacking in close combat infantry, um, because most of the close combat builds that you can make is based on infantry equipment. So like the access that they can get to tough fighter, which is good, but they don't really have any special rules that benefits that. So they lack special rules on their infantry. Not on all infantry. There are like at least two types of infantry that have interesting special rules. The Rangers being one, um, but they don't have like they haven't got a Lancer type unit. They haven't got a Gurkha type unit. Um, they haven't got the Soviet body armored engineers. So they lack something in special rules on infantry. And they also are somewhat behind on inexperienced infantry, maybe because the main advantage of Americans is their equipment, and you don't want to give that to inexperienced infantry, so you're not typically buying inexperienced infantry for the Americans. So there are certain builds that you don't really see with Americans. Now, the army builds are a bit more limited than what we've seen so far, and that is because of this focus on skirmish infantry, I think. They can do the mixed bag, they can do that really well. Um, they also have the possibility of doing the noob basher, the multi-rocket launcher spam lists, especially if you have multiple platoons, because they have cheap access to multi-rocket launchers in the form of the 105mm rocket launcher. They can also do the Death Star. They have some very, very good tanks, expensive, heavy tanks, um, with large guns on them, and especially if you run the veteran, you can get that ability to move and fire. That is pretty good, but extremely expensive. So that is a Death Star build, which usually I would not recommend. Um, they can also do sort of ish forward deployment. They have a few types of troops that can forward deploy really well. They have the Rangers that have an extra movement, and they have some scout units that they can forward deploy. So they can do forward deployment, although not with units similar to the scouts of the Soviets, where you have a close combat unit on the center line. They can't really do that. And they have that very special Recce MSU build that has been cropping up a bit, at least here in Denmark. I haven't seen it that much abroad, but it's based on the FSSF scout teams, which are small teams, infantry models, and they have escape moves like cavalry or Recce vehicles. So you can have an all Recce army of small teams that's really hard to kill. Very interesting build, and it's sort of a cross between Recce builds and MSU builds. It's very, very interesting. But the build that they really do well and where their competitive edge is in the barbecue lists, because they can take engineers, regular engineers, put them into Dodges, have maybe a bazooka team with the engineers in the Dodge, and then throw them up and flamethrower stuff. And because they're regular, they get them cheaper than the veterans of other nations. So, Americans were the first nation that could really run flamer heavy lists, and that is maybe their best forte. So for me, the standout units of the American selectors is the M3 Stuart with Recce and sponsored LMGs. You know this, the Darker Stuart. It is just that good. But you could also go and look at the Howitzer Sherman if you're looking at tanks. The Howitzer Sherman is pretty cheap for what it does. It is a medium tank 9 plus, and it has a medium howitzer. That is pretty good. Um, and definitely terrifying for infantry units to be shot at with a howitzer. Right. Sorry, I have a. It's harvest time, so there was a large piece of machinery just driving by. A lot of noise. I'm sorry about that. Sounds like they're stopping outside my house. Which they are, I guess. Okay, here they go. Right. Sorry about that. For me, also the late war infantry units, regular, stand out because you can have double BARs in them, and the BAR is one of those pieces of equipment that I would really recommend you look at. The advantage of the BAR is you get the range of an LMG, but because it's so much cheaper than an LMG, because you're just getting one extra shot, so it's only 5 points. So the BAR is way less expensive, meaning you don't cry so much about it when a sniper takes him out. And in the late war infantry squad, you can take 2 BARs, so one sniper hit will not be enough, and they're still cheaper than a an LMG. So 4 shots, just like the LMG, taking up 2 people at half the price. That is awesome. Also, I think there is something with the Marines which gets stubborn, and you can take a lot of different equipment choices that make them tough fighter as well. So tough fighter, stubborn, that sort of is bordering on assault builds. It's very close to anyway. Um, so the Marines are very much a bullet magnet unit, veteran, stubborn. They don't go away easily. And then there are the FSSF Scouts. I talked about them before. They have that escape move, really, really interesting unit to look at. Of course, the 115mm rocket launcher, pretty cheap and good multi-rocket launcher. If you can take multiple platoons, you can run multiple rocket launchers, making it a noob bashing build. And of course, the regular engineers, I've already talked about those. Those are what makes the barbecue lists of the Americans good, especially maybe combined with the bazookas, which is one of the best anti-tank choices of the game. Yes, the Soviet dogs are better, simply because they hit, but the bazooka you can fire every single turn, and it has a 24-inch range, which is very, very good. And if you compare it to the German version of it, the Panzerschreck, then it's cheaper. And they're basically the same. Yeah. So those are the standard units that I think you should look at when building American lists. And as you can see, there's a lot of shooting in this. There's like the barbecue elements and there's the shooting elements. So for me, Americans are really a skirmish army. They are an army that moves about and shoots. Very aggressive, but not assaulty at all. And that was it for me. So light is fading, evening is coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly do enjoy making these, and I hope they're useful for you as well. Right, that's it. Next time, I think I will. What should I do next time? Italians? Ooh. See you then. Cheers.